Annabelle's worked with massive companies like Microsoft and basically helping them with their social media and social in business. And she's a massive advocate for using social in business, not just as a marketing tool, but literally all through the business and throughout an organization. And she's going to share some of her experiences both as an employee of a large multinational, but also as an advisor to many other businesses as well with her business 42 Ponies. Interesting story about 42 Ponies. 42 Ponies as an organizational name comes from 42, which is the secret.
The answer to life.
Answer to life. Anyone know the reference? The answer to life itself? Hitchhikers. Yes, indeed. Well done.
Lovely.
Points for that. So hitchhikers, and then ponies because Annabelle spends a lot of her time in Dublin, my hometown, then Stony Batter, where you have cobblestone walkways, and back in the day, a lot of ponies walking around. And still, to this day, a lot of people walking around with ponies. You've got to come to Dublin. It's a bit weird sometimes. And hence 42 Ponies. So please put your hands together for Annabelle.
Oh, wonderful. Hello, and thank you for having me, and thanks for the nice introduction. And thank you for getting the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy reference. Not a lot of people do. All right, I'm very excited to be talking today and to be sharing some of my experiences and some of my thoughts, broader thoughts with you. We have about 15 to 20 minutes per speaker, so it's not the in-depth discussions that you sometimes have, but I'm here all day, so excited to hear your thoughts. I'm going to be talking about bringing social home. So what does that mean? What's the general gist of it? And I'm going to start with the general gist. For me, social is only good when you give before you take. And for a lot of companies, that's not the case. They set up a Facebook page, they set up a Twitter page, and say, okay, we're just going to post some kind of content that's interesting to us and without regard to what's interesting to the audience. And then they don't get. People are not excited about it. So that's basically how this whole thought started. And as Johnny said, I'm a big advocate of social business, of companies incorporating what started outside in social media, this give more, begin with giving thought, and then incorporating it into every aspect of their business. So that's kind of where today comes from. I'm going to share with you some of the ideas and some of the things that I implemented working, for example, for Microsoft. All right, so this is marketing and this is PR. And when you look at most of your client companies, probably that's how social and social media and digital communications probably is handled nowadays. You have, see, I have a PR background, so I'm the good guy, but you have Darth Vader in marketing. It says, I own social media and I own this communications channel. And then you have PR that says, well, but you're doing it all wrong because it's not just about blabbing out marketing, blah, blah. It's about actual conversations and giving actual value to your audiences. So this is how it all started, but that's totally wrong. This, in my experience, talking with a lot of multinationals as well as small companies that are starting out with digital communications, this is what destroys it. This is what makes you think you have to take, because you have the internal politics to fight. So when you look at how organizations are set up nowadays, they're more like a Death Star or the Death Star 2.0 maybe. So it used to be that you had marketing and you had PR and they had the big microphone, right? You had those two distinct departments and they were communicating out into the world. And they said, you know, we have a one voice policy and we have maybe 3 people for the entire organization that get to talk. And then social media came, right? And then everyone could talk and everyone started to talk. So now when you look at organizations, we have the Death Star in all its round and open glory, meaning that you have communication just bursting out of every corner. And when you're really honest to yourself and how it's been done before social media, all that has happened. Your sales has talked to clients and your HR has talked to their friends and family, but it wasn't as widely broadcast as it is through social and through online. So, and here comes the question that plagues all the marketing / PR departments of the world, is how do we deal with that? Do we allow people, everyone, to just talk? Do we monitor that? Do we hold on and cling to our one voice policy? How do we deal with that? At Microsoft, I used to be the social media lead for Microsoft in Germany, and I built up social media basically from the ground up. And with Microsoft, you have a ton of different products, and you have a ton of people that are very passionate about their products, or even about the newest feature of a product. So it's very, very granular, but they're very excited and very passionate about their work. So I had basically either the choice of saying, I'm Annabelle, I'm going to do social media communications for Microsoft in Germany all by myself. You know, back then I was a little more humble than the 42, the answer to life, the universe, and everything. So I said to myself, well, you know what? I have no clue what the new SharePoint feature is, or what SQL Server, if a developer asks, what SQL Server can do for them. So I need to harness the most potential out of this company. Meaning, we actually made the decision at Microsoft in Germany that we would have our employees as our best ambassadors. Which, when you think about it, that's why you hire them, right? They're people that represent your company. And not every one of them is good at communicating, and not everyone is exceptional at communicating online. But that was like 2009 or so, that's when it really kicked in, that as an organization, especially as a communications function in an organization, you have to change. It's not the other people that have to change, and it's not the employees that have to change. It's you first and foremost that has to change to enable your organization to be your best ambassadors. So that's basically how everyone was looking at me. It's like, so we have about 3,000 people in Germany, and you're telling us now that we need to make each one of them our best ambassador, and how is that going to work? I don't see that happening, because this guy, he might be great at programming, but he's really, really not good at tweeting or at writing his own blog. So a lot of organizations that I still talk to today look at me, well, not quite with that face, but with at least the look of desperation in their eyes, and they say, how can I do that? How can I set myself up? For me, very logical consequence of making my employees the best ambassadors and harnessing their potential when it comes to communications. So that's where we go back to you have to give first and foremost. Companies need to realize that in order to make employees your best ambassadors, in order to harness their potential, you have to provide a service. And that's basically where the social aspect and the social media aspect of how it works externally starts transferring to internal, into your organization. We're again in the Death Star, but this time we're not in the marketing and PR department that's broadcasting out and not with no regard for anyone else. We're in the newly formed Communications Command Center, which functions as a service for the entire organization. So what do I mean by that? It used to be that marketing would have their campaigns, and they would go external and start communicating their campaigns. And then if you're sitting and you're the janitor of the company, or you're in sales, a lot of times you would hear about these campaigns on TV, or you would see a poster and think to yourself, all right, the marketing department, all right, I guess I'm going to run with that. If you're lucky, there would be some kind of, here's a PowerPoint deck in case you really need to know, or here is a blip on our intranet. And that fundamentally has to change, and that's what I fundamentally changed when working for Microsoft. The PR department, because social was housed in the PR department, started providing services for the entire organization. So my internal audience would know about the campaigns that we were running and would know the links that they could be using to, maximize our reach, and to actually be able to know what to report and how that works in how that fits in the grander scheme of things. And we would have social advisories. So I would send out emails to my internal social media community of about 250 people that were communicating then out for Microsoft. And I'd say, hey, this is green, and I'd love for you to share this. And as a service, I'm going to explain to you why this is important. I'm going to explain to you from when to when, and I'm going to give you suggestions for Twitter and Facebook posts. Super, super easy. Not entirely, there had to be no giant organization just behind it just to make these advisories happen. But they were such a big hit that very soon after we started them, people from within the organization, outside of PR, would come to me and say, Annabelle, I have this amazing event. Could we make a social advisory for that? This is amazing, because it multiplies the potential for it being shared to the right audiences and for it being shared by people that have a passion for our company. Duh, our employees, right? Colleagues. And we would also have the red social advisories, which like 5 times a year. So for example, if an important leak was happening, we would send out an advisory internally and say, hey, this is red. Do not comment, do not like, do not do anything, and we will inform you when the threat is over and you can start doing this again. But the main thought behind all of that was it's a service, and I'm going to be as transparent as I can with my colleagues, with the employees, and really make sure that I make them to the best ambassadors that they can be. And I'm going to have a slide on a couple more things that we did just in a minute. What I think, though, is really, really important in any sort of organization, and it's also an important learning, when you start communicating internally, what you really have the mirror in front of your face that lets you know if what you're communicating is BS or not. So a lot of times when you communicate out into the world, you know, people will be like, oh yeah, that's not very interesting, or oh, I don't buy it. But you don't have that immediate feedback that you have when you communicate to your colleagues that know the products, that know the roadmap, that know what's going on. And if you are talking about BS, they will tell you. That's where I refer to, I call it the storytelling tree, but basically it's what every organization, represents every organization. So if you're an organization of any kind, if you're an agency and talking about the entire organization, or if you're just the PR department, you have the trunk and you have to know what you stand for, who you are and what you stand for. That for me, that's the trunk. You have to have a strong trunk and you have to know. We just talked about this. Netflix says our values really are our values. Whereas in a lot of other companies, you have a list of values and it's a nice piece of paper. So when I work with startups, for example, nowadays, one of the first things I ask them is why they do what they do. Most of them will say, oh yeah, we want to reach this milestone, or we want to do that and that. But they can't tell me why they're doing what they're doing. And that's where you don't have a strong trunk. So as a company or any kind of organization, you have to have a strong trunk, and then you can tailor your conversation, your stories and your communication, the branches and then the leaves, based on that trunk. And in this context here, and what's probably most important to you and when you're talking to your clients, is that they have to have the roots, the invisible force down here, they have to have the roots to actually hold up the tree. Because if you have a giant trunk and you want to grow giant branches and you want to grow big leaves, but you don't have any kind of roots that support that, well, you're going to fail. Very, very common example is that we're a cutting-edge company and we're in the modern day, but we have Facebook and YouTube blocked internally. Happens all the time. Still, to this day, happens all the time that you preach something externally, what you stand for, what you think you stand for, and you do not deliver internally. And that's where that service mentality comes into play. You have to create the processes and the roots and the services to actually enable your organization to live your trunk and to live your stories. So this is what I call social media governance, is what we did, and I think a few of the pieces that companies can take and can implement. You should have it doesn't have to be a social media council, but a social council where people out of all different departments come together and talk about how social or how the trunk should be implemented within their departments and overall. At Microsoft, it helped immensely once we got everyone together and we had a joint budget that we could spend on things and we could create services, for example, like web monitoring. Of course, the PR department did web monitoring, but you had to have a certain kind of commitment to actually expand that and create a service for the entire organization. Just sending out an email every day saying, hey, this is what's going on, dear sales department, dear management team. You have to have commitment from everyone. And sometimes people will tell you, that doesn't work for me at all. And then you can implement that in your social strategy as well. Things like leading by example. Organizations that have a management that doesn't lead by example, you're going to fail. So you have to get your bosses, you have to get your CEOs to at least try to embrace living that service mentality internally. And when it comes to implementing social communications internally, that's exactly where you have to start, with your management. Then we have a reporting framework. What I found was one of the key factors to get people to accept the changes internally is really to make social communications comparable to things they were already reporting on. So classical marketing KPIs. And that was 2009, like I said. Nowadays, it's this easy to pull in the numbers and validate what you're doing, be it internally and using social for your different business departments, or be it external. So the gist of it is you have to have a framework that really supports that. These should be some of your roots that support the service and social mentality internally. And what I also find what helps is to actually have social networks internally. So this is one that's called Convo, and of course I'm sure you've all heard about Yammer. Enabling your organization internally to flow and to actually have, without hierarchies, have social interactions. I feel in the English-speaking countries it's usually a little easier, but nevertheless there's still a lot of companies out there that say, okay, well, I'm the boss and I can't be reached other than through my secretary. That's not a service mentality. You have to really think it through and then use the tools and set up the processes to make it transcend your organization. All right, and then in the end, hopefully you go from to this and you're happy and content. You know what your trunk is, you know what you stand for, and you actually enable your organization by giving more than you take, at least in the beginning, and then you reap the rewards. All right, and I'm good on time. Wonderful. Thank you so much for listening, and I'd be very, very interested to hear in the hot dog break, I guess, what you guys have to say and how it's done at your companies. Thank you.